how important it is that we value land, that we value ecosystems. Could you explain a bit more about how we actually value the trees and the fields and the seas that we live in and rely on?
Thank you. I think this is, a question that is becoming increasingly important and is receiving more and more attention. The challenge is that right now in today's world, the natural assets have not been given any meaningful value to the extent that its use is being overexploited, and it is taking us in a very, very serious direction because of this overexploitation across all types of natural resources. You talk water, you talk forests, you talk minerals, you talk about extractions, even our oceans are being overexploited. So there is a global increased attention to this particular issue, and during the Rio conference, a number of panels will actually be discussing this issue. The intention there is to try and attach some economic value to these natural resources with the aim of actually reaching a stage where you actually put in a real value. At this point in time, I would personally recommend a gradual transition in this direction, because if you put in the real value, it may be actually quite prohibitive for certain aspects of the natural resources. But as we speak about green development, as we speak about promoting green growth, it is important that when we develop plans for development, especially within developing countries' context, it is important to look at the actual value of the natural resource so that the decision makers are able to make informed policy decisions and select the most appropriate options, development options, that takes full recognition of these resources in actually making the development choice that a country would actually take on board.
Is there a danger that by putting the price on natural resources, we forget about the value?
Not necessarily. I think one needs to take full recognition that there are certain aspects of the natural resource that is of public good nature, such as the biodiversity. And I can come up with other examples in this area, where you cannot really look at the value within a certain national boundaries of a particular country. And this puts in additional responsibility on the global community as a whole to actually protect and value this resource. But there are also other types of natural resources, such as land, where you can really put in economic value and look at it within a national context when you come with the analysis of development options.
How do I value a tree? How much does a tree cost? How much does a part of a sea cost? It's difficult. What factors should we take into account when putting a value on elements of our planet?
This is the $1 million question. I wish I had the answer myself, but I can share with you some, things that one need to be mindful of. You take the example of a tree. A tree has a very important role in nature. It absorbs carbon and helps with the carbon sequestration process. So there are so many ways that one can look at it by actually how much carbon it can absorb and store into the ground, compared to actually what it would cost to reduce the same amount of carbon emission into the atmosphere. That's one way of looking at it. You can look at it in a more expensive way, for instance, about what is the cost of the technology for carbon capture and storage. This is a very expensive way of actually doing it. And then a broad range, another range of possible technologies. And then when you attach a monetary value to these, one would need to make some form of judgment as to what would be the most representative and realistic economic value that would put in. And I think the same model could be applied on so many different aspects of the natural resources that we live in.
And a final question: there are many people around the world. Many Bolivians, maybe Bolivian Indians, were protesting at COP17 in Durban about putting a value on their rainforests. They felt that by putting a value on their rainforests, it diminished really their responsibility for the rainforest and how much it meant to them. Can you understand the concerns of people that if we are increasingly putting a monetary value on different elements of our planet, that they may, in a sense, lose control over them?
I can definitely understand their concerns. I may not necessarily agree with it. But I believe that it is important for the forests question in particular, that it gets the right value, because it is an important part for the people that are living in these forests and exploiting them, to be able to recognize what's the impact of unsustainable exploitation of these forests, but also for those who are commercially exploiting the forest to appreciate and understand how much this exploitation is actually costing the environment and costing the whole world globally. So putting the monetary value on it would make definitely a very positive contribution to all sides or to everybody that is actually using the forest, whether it's living in the forest or exploiting the forest or managing the forest.